Thank you. Carol?
Thanks. I don't have the answer for Constance's question as to how, what should we do to improve the effectiveness of our 27 bloated, inadequate, broke militaries. And you're not surprised that I don't have the answer. As for General Klaus Wittmann's question related to Turkey having been an associate member of the WEU, and having been cut off of all the advantages, I think that's a fascinating observation. The WEU actually reminds, I think of it today as the Cheshire cat, of which only the smile remains, and the smile being the parliament, its parliamentary assembly. But until recently, it also had a general secretary. I just wonder what happened to the general secretary of the WEU now that Javier Solana has retired. But the interesting suggestion that you make is, of course, just another one of those things which would be subject to the approval of all of the full members of the WEU, and we all know who those are and who are not, and what the views of at least one of those members might be. You know, which brings to mind the thought, I'm so glad I said that these are just my personal views. If a country is looking very badly for help from elsewhere in Europe, couldn't the rest of Europe ask that country to help it in various other aspects where we need that help? And I leave that aside. One doesn't want to do that kind of hard bargaining, does one?
Thank you.
Thank you. First, about self-created paranoia, maybe, unfortunately, there are some elements of paranoid consciousness in Russia, not only now, but also in the past. But just to be fair, I would remind you that since '99, NATO or key NATO countries launched 3 major wars in the world. We can discuss each of them, but massive use of force came back in international politics, not because of Russia, but because of the United States. It does not improve situation with Russian traditional paranoia. CFE, mentioned by you, Janusz. CFE was, Russia withdrew from CFE after several years of asking other countries to ratify. Because Russia did it in 2004, but nobody except Ukraine, Kazakhstan and Belarus, nobody followed. And the question was very simple, to disconnect CFE regime from Transnistria, because there are 2 different problems. But Western countries decided to get everything at once. Now we have what we have. Guarantees for Ukraine. I'm strongly in favor of the idea of security guarantees of Ukraine. I think that will change a lot in the whole security and political atmosphere in Europe. The problem is that previous Ukrainian leadership did not see any other option for security guarantees but NATO membership. I think now we have a good chance to be very creative and to start to discuss other options, and I'm sure they are possible. And about nuclear disarmament, I'm afraid when we discuss it in the framework of the NPT regime, now it's not a right framework anymore, because we see regionalization of nuclear arms problems, and countries which have obtained nuclear arms or are trying to do it for completely different reasons than Soviet Union and United States or China many decades ago. They do it for regional reasons, and nuclear disarmament is a question of very difficult diplomatic job in each particular conflict. We can't rely on universal regimes anymore. They will not work. Thank you.
First of all, Klaus Wittmann's point on Turkey and the shift from WU to EU, I think is very well taken. And I must say, I don't have an answer to his question, because at the time when this was happening, all of the member states of the European Union were in favor of Turkey joining the Union. France in particular had a president, Jacques Chirac, who was very strongly in favor of Turkey joining the Union. So I don't know why it didn't happen. Maybe others in the room will know. Constanze, your question and your point. Your question, I'll give a very blunt and very depressing answer, and that is, I don't expect much to happen until something pretty awful happens to us. I think it will take a very serious event to jolt us into some sort of seriousness, and in order to provoke a step change in the SDP. Your comment about America and NATO, one of the reasons I think why this is happening is also linked to Obama's foreign policy posture, which strikes me as being, in a sense, and the word may come across as a bit strange, but I will defend it. It's a little bit like a return to the realist tradition of American foreign policy. Russia is more important than Poland. China is more important than Japan, and so on. It's a caricature, it's obviously not that simple, but we have seen plenty of elements of that shift of positioning of American policy. I think we are witnessing the closing of the cycle which opened with the election of President Carter back in 1976 or whenever it was. Less Wilsonianism, more realism, the limits of power have been encountered. NATO in the Middle East, membership a priori is excluded because the treaty talks specifically about countries of North America and Europe. Although there is a very vocal group in Israel which would want membership of Israel for NATO, you can guess what that would do to NATO membership of other countries in the region. If we're talking about operations, on this one, you know, I have no patience for Rumsfeld's policies, but Rumsfeld's analyses tended to be often very much to the point. And when he coined the expression, the mission determines the coalition, a few days after 9/11, he described pretty much the world, which also brings us back to the question which you posed earlier on. Yes, the Americans were right to use CENTCOM to go into Afghanistan in the autumn of 2001 and to turn down a NATO operation, because in every way it was more sensible to do it through CENTCOM. I would add that personally I was always hostile to NATO taking over the bulk of the work of Operation Enduring Freedom in Afghanistan, and got plenty of flack for having written about that in 2003, 2004. I think with a few years hindsight, many people would agree that we didn't make the smartest move. And if it came always on the Middle East, use of force vis-à-vis Iran, if it ever came to that, I would expect that to be entirely ad hoc. On the issue of nuclear guarantees, defense guarantees in the Persian Gulf, well, first of all, the United States, Britain and France have defense pacts with a number of Gulf countries. In the case of France, it's Kuwait, Qatar, and the United Arab Emirates. We have a naval base a joint base, actually, it's not simply naval, in the United Arab Emirates, which was opened last year. These are serious defense commitments. These are not memoranda of understanding. So in a sense, we're already there. Secondly, I would not expect this to deal with the consequences of Iran acquiring a nuclear weapon. Iran, for the countries of the region, is not simply a threat, it is also a rival. It is a rival for the leadership of the Muslim world, and this would make the acquisition of nuclear weapons by Iran something which would be rapidly imitated by a number of Arab countries of the region. Western defense guarantees plus nuclear proliferation. Great combination.